Alright, today we're gonna watch some patches. This came out today. It's probably gonna come out next week, but it's a very good direction. I wanted to share you guys most of what we could be expecting, mostly from competitive, or that I would really like to see from these patches, because they're actually relatively good, aside from some weird things in the middle. So let's kind of jump into it. In terms of Gwen, it's a really nice touch. She's been suffering a lot. Taking away 20 seconds off of this is going to be tremendous for her dueling potential, so she can all in much quicker. Uh, in more simple situations, she won't have the trouble of feeling really bad post ult, where she needs 2 minutes to kind of just get back into it. Uh, it's really nice. The CD refund is also really good, but it's lacking. The problem with Gwen when she started falling off was Riot made a huge patch to nerf her based on her jungle performance, as she was able to flex very easily between both roles. And one of the things that they changed was actually her attack range on her E, which actually made a lot of difference, and it was one of the stronger things that actually gutted her. So I'd prefer it if they brought it back and kept these changes out, but I can see why they would like the appeal of going for something a bit softer, so she just gets a little bit of love, but not too strong that she immediately comes back into the meta. It's appreciated, but I won't think it will truly solve her issues. You might see her more, like once in a blue moon for a counter matchup against Gragas, for example, or she just wants to scale. But overall, she probably won't actually be picked. Pantheon, I don't see the changes. Eventually, when the patch comes out, I might talk about it. Yasuo. Yasuo is an interesting. And Yasuo and Yone, we can actually talk about both at the same time. They are absolutely useless. The HP is nice. 30 base HP means you get to trade slightly, barely less than an auto attack. So it feels good. It will be nice for him, but it won't change his current state in the game. Less than seconds on ult also doesn't change anything in the game. His ult's practically always up anyway. It's not 10 seconds that's gonna make a change here. Neither does it on Yon. It's nice that he will have his ult up more often, but it's at level 16. At level 16 he's already winning, and it's not by 20 seconds off his ult that any play is gonna be made differently. Especially by the way fights in the late game start to happen, where it's not sporadic. You always wait for a major objective or a major pick, so you'd never like be of a difference that these 20 seconds do. Aside from, and it's a good comparison of difference from this ultimate, right? You're saving 20 seconds off the initial of level 6, while here you're doing it at level 16. And obviously a change of 20 seconds at level 6 makes a greater impact than at level 16, where ults are pretty much very low cooldown always. Here you can argue the same thing, but since it's already so low as on 80 seconds of cooldown, it doesn't really apply the same theory as the Gwen one does. Plus, the Gwen one does a lot more than the Yasuo one. So Gwen will feel this a lot, but Yasuo won't really feel this. He will barely feel this as well, and Yon will just not feel this as well. These are mostly placebo buffs. So we're going to go to actually the good buffs of this patch, starting with Wukong, who's kind of getting a lot of love towards the jungle. Starting off of 1 second off his Q at all ranks, which is amazing because this makes it a lot easier for Q spam. Basically, when you are playing Wukong, your Q gets reduced by the auto attacks you do. So shaving it off a second means you have to basically do less autos to just completely use this ability, and it feels absolutely amazing to be able to do that and to do proper combos. So I'm really excited for to see how Wukong does. The W cooldown being reduced is also really good, and the added bonus that I can jump walls is ridiculous. This will allow, especially in the jungle, and especially in flanks for top lane Wukong and mid lane Wukong, to go through positions that he usually can't go in, which is something he really struggles with. The problem a lot with Wukong is you either use W to enter invisible into a lane or a flank position, and then you don't have like a misdirection tool or a true escape tool per se. or you can't knock them up with the clone and things like that. So giving him this really amplifies the abilities of what the clone can truly do, and you can create a lot of good opportunities, especially in the jungle, to go for creative ganks that people aren't expecting, and for creative flanks that people aren't expecting, as long as much better dragon steals and contestations. Like, it's not even debatable. Now you can actually contest for do like most junglers who can just jump walls and contest objectives very easily. So this is going to be very good. E-monster damage going up also means he's going to clear jungle a lot faster. It's not going to be extremely faster, but these are, Diana levels of faster. So you'll definitely feel it a lot. Now the question becomes how much it will shave off. If it shaves off 5 seconds, it's going to be really good. If it only shaves off 3, it's kind of weak. If it shaves off 15 seconds after first clear, it's just a monster from there on. And you'll probably become a very strong pick or ban champion, but it will depend on how well players adapt to it. He's a really strong fighter. He can manage pretty well against some of the matchups in the jungle that currently exist. He does really well into tank tops as well, and he's a very good assassin. So he's very good in terms of mobility and placement in the draft and what he wants to do in the game. He's very flexible. So being able to flex between jungle and top again is going to make him extremely viable. EAP ratio is interesting. It's never really used. This might be to incentivize the Zhonya's build in case you want to go full on in, which is interesting, but I don't really believe it's going to be very used. So another very interesting change is going to be to Neeko's on hit effect. I'm just going to clear this so people can see it a bit better. The Neeko change is going to mostly be on the W on it damage, which is going up by 40 points, which is actually pretty insane to think about. Usually on it effects that are numerical, so no percentages, usually get buff like 20, maybe 10. They usually don't go too hard on it because it completely changes the viability of a champion, and they went for 40 of base damage differential. So this is gonna immediately make 80 on it Gwen a lot better again. But she does have that little problem that top lane is coming back into, more tank-oriented metas. So she might suffer a lot from it. She could now be picked more often into certain matchups to control them. So she used to be picked a lot against weak bruiser melee matchups or juggernauts. So things like Darius, Ilawi, Mordekaiser used to really suffer against the ability that Neeko has to just completely stop them in their tracks. Camille also suffers a lot from this. Nar suffers a lot against this. But the problem is that now people are starting to pick up Ornn, they're starting to pick up Sion. I think Gragas and Sho'gaf will start making appearances again. And although they are countered, so things like Fiora can come back, things like not Camille wouldn't necessarily come back, but Darius can be more picked. Irelia can be more picked, and I think Neeko can function really well as a counter to the counter of the meta, if that makes sense. So she'll be very interesting to keep an eye on, but I don't believe she will be that insanely picked. We might see her here and there, but nothing too special about it. Moving on to Gangplank, which is for sure one of the weirdest buffs in the patch. Gangplank is currently like one of the best champions in the game. It's not even contestable. And they gave it like a gigantic buff of 85 on his passive damage. So his level 2 and 3 are insanely better. He's gonna control the laning phase a lot better. If he gets Eternity Force before you get the Mythic, which is his plan, he's gonna be incredibly strong in the 1v1s. And now his mana cost on W is also smaller, so he can sustain his laning phase a lot more as well. So Gangplank is for sure gonna be a pick or ban next patch, especially in competitive. I do believe that he's too high skilled for regular players to, so anything below challenger, and even then, to really be proficient at him unless you're like completely full on main him. And even then, you're not going to see him too much in solo queue. People might try, but if you stutter him early game, you will be completely useless as long as you end the game before 30 minutes. But in the hands of someone who was pretty good at Gangplank, this changes a complete change in how many of the matchups went, and he probably will be extremely dominant next patch. Right. Moving on to Kalista, this is kind of a Yasuo situation where all numbers feel good to be going up, but they don't really change the situation that she's in. Like, you'll feel nicer because you'll get one more cast of an ability in lane. You'll feel nicer because you'll move more and be able to dodge more easily with your hops. The attack speed per level is also feeling nice, but her main problem has always been that she doesn't have items per se, right? You can't really go Kraken because it doesn't feel natural. You can't really go Gale Force because it also doesn't feel natural, in all honesty. You can do fun things with Gale Force and E, but usually don't max E, and Gale Force kind of makes your jumps really weird. So people usually tend to opt for Shield Bow, which Shield Bow itself is as the evolved into a item that she doesn't really want to build either. She's kind of forced to. Her entire game plan is also around being very aggressive early game, and most of the current meta is devolving again into long range that she can't touch. So although these are like interesting buffs, we won't really see her, or and she won't be good like for another couple of months until the meta starts changing. Things like Kaisa really shine and come back like properly. Maybe Samira if she comes back, maybe Vayne if she comes back, and even then, it's such a gamble to play Kalista. In solo queue, you probably will have a fun time and she'll feel a lot better. And if you're a main, this probably gives you two more divisions up. But if you're looking to pick her in a pro game, she won't be picked. She's really weak. The only way I can see her being picked is the players are playing against a much weaker team, and they just want to snowball it and then quick. Because otherwise, this champion is just not going to do anything. Right, moving on to Lilia. This is kind of a Yasuo situation. This buff to her damage on W is really nice. It won't be felt a lot in terms of fighting other players, to be honest. But in terms of jungle clearing, you'll feel amazing. The healing is honestly kind of neglectable because this healing only applies on champions and only applies on her passive. So like it's cool if she hits a tank and shreds for their max HP and she has a decent amount of AP with two items, which isn't really that decent, but it helps. But in reality, you won't really get any HP out of this. It's like saying, hey, your Soraka W's now give 5 more HP. It's like it's nice, but it's not real. It's not really a change. Although I saying this, she is in a pretty good spot. She's a really good champion for competitive. She doesn't really work well in solo queue because the nature of a champion is mostly on abusing our own prio lanes to counter jungle and make the enemy jungle basically not play the game. And it's a lot easier to coordinate and prepare something for that situation in competitive, not so much in solo queue. So she might be picked in competitive due to these buffs, but I don't really expect it. And if she does, I don't think it will last for long because people will just feel like she's the same as before. And in all honesty, if we want to pick an AP champion in the jungle, we just might as well pick Karthus. This 10% buff might seem really small, but the amount of damage he does to camps and how quickly he clears is already absurd. Having this being buffed is just like is just adding fuel to the fire. The amount of clear speed that he will have next patch is ridiculous, and the ability that he will have to completely uh, perma clear camps and probably even have enough timing and consistency to steal camps is going to be ridiculous. If teams can really work well to get this champion into their comps with the GP buffs, I really believe that Karthus Gangplank will be perma-banned next patch. Now, there is the caveat that no one plays Karthus except for like Malice, and Blabber did it a couple of weeks ago, and it went really well, although he kind of blundered, but it kind of showed the power that he had. Malice is just always getting the champion perma-banned, so it's obvious that it's really strong. It's just a problem that he needs a very specific condition that I think is starting to be met with the changes in the meta. As top as top lane becomes more tank favored, as it's been growing into, picks like Lucian mid will start rising a bit more, not only as an answer to the tanks in the top lane, but also as an answer to the mages that are getting weaker in the mid lane, and they're starting to get more abused. We saw this also in NA recently, where Lucian was picked against Victor and performed extremely well. So I do believe there's a very good chance that Karthus solution Gangplank lanes become a thing, giving a lot of prior to Karthus to completely dominate the game, just sitting in the jungle farming it really well. It's a very unused strategy, but it's probably one of the best and most reliable ones, and I'm pretty excited to see if teams will pick it up or if it'll just kind of shimmer down. But for sure, whoever plays Karthus in the jungle will, if you're platinum, you're probably gonna hit diamond, or at least you go 3 divisions up, because the power you're gonna get from this, and if you play well, is gigantic. Problem is, if you're playing Karthus and plat, you might have a problem with that. It won't really go too well. But if you're proficient enough at Karthus, this will be really, really fun. Really, really felt. Right. We don't have the changes for Zeri, unfortunately, but we can see Rise. I really like these changes on Rise because Riot has done this before, where they lowered the specific bonus that was making a champion work and increasing its AP ratio. So this is basically a very flat out saying, hey, don't build tank Rise. This is direct, very simple. Don't go Fimbul Winter Frozen Heart. Just go AP. It's as simple as you can get. Sadly, I don't think it will work too well. I think maybe it will stop people from doing Frozen Heart, but I don't think it will stop people from doing Fimbulwinter. The capability of Rise to do Everfrost into Fimbulwinter and just work really well as a pick tool, like a weaker, more damage-oriented TF, is still really potent. So people will for sure kind of keep using Everfrost Fimbulwinter, but it won't be as good, and at least it will give a AP will have a much better option, so Rise won't be as safe, which is actually really good. Lee Sin nerfs, which is rather surprising. Champion isn't doing too well. He's being picked, but he's not performing well. So I wonder if this is more of a buff nerf to kind of say, hey, you really don't like, we really shouldn't play with him. He's not good, and we're kind of sick of seeing him, or if this is just something was found or something was trying to be done. But Lee Sin itself is not in a good position. The nerfs also barely do anything. Base AD and less 5 damage on both Qs is like pretty neglectable. There will be some matchups you'll start to lose because you don't have this amount of damage, but it's mostly neglectable. Jace changes. Appreciated, but too late. So they're really nice changes. It really makes it a good focus to punish his early game. So it's really appreciated that they did this. but it's kind of late. Because the problem with Jace is that it was working really well against Gnar, against bruisers like Camille, against stuff like Graves, Gragas, because he basically had a safe early game and then scaled really well, and people couldn't kill him because he had so much stats. But as the meta rotates into tank, not only will he fall off because he doesn't really manage well with his poke against tanks, um, but his tankiness that he used to have that was nerfed won't really matter either because people won't really do trades with him. So he now enters a bad situation where he actually cannot trade anymore and is in a meta that he can't be picked. So he's basically just gone. He just got completely flat out killed. He can be picked, and if you're very proficient at him and can live early, or even get a kill early somehow, he'll feel amazing. His power didn't go anywhere necessarily. It's just his survivability early got really, really damaged. And if someone roams towards you, or paths, or jungler's path towards you, and you don't get any cover, you're gonna get really fucked. And there's really nothing you can do about it. Okay, so in terms of Rengar, this is minor good changes. He was doing way too much to turrets. He was being completely abusable by split pushing. It was completely ridiculous. And the buff to W was really nice to help him jungle clear a bit better. So it's like minor tweaks to kind of say, hey, we want him to be functioning primarily as a jungler. He's doing too well as split pusher, so we're just gonna like tweak the numbers so things are better, which is very nice. Now, a change that I'm really happy happened, Umberglaive. So this item, aside from Pike, is never built. It's just, maybe Senna sometimes builds it, but it's very rare. And I think the change to not only lower its cooldown so it's active more often, but also lower its price range is really good. Not only for competitive, but also for solo queue, I think a lot more junglers will start picking up this item. Things like Tal and Zed, Kiana, Graves. Rek'Sai is debatable. She kind of doesn't want to, but I can understand why she would do it. Wukong, if he goes lethality, can also pick up the item. And being able to be bought so much sooner, especially for jungle and supports, and having a lower cooldown means the impact of the item will be a lot more felt. And it has pretty decent stats with the lethality and the AD it gives. So I'm really happy that we're probably going to see a lot more of this item in both solo queue and competitive. And I'm really happy Riot actually took a very good approach to it. Unlike with Abyssal Mask, which just got more armor, magic resist shred, and the bonus it gives is slightly bigger, which is like, this is not why the item is weak, by the way, right? Like, the item is just really, really skewed. All the other options are so much better, it's not even comparable. It's kind of a situation where you kind of need to kind of revamp the item straight up. I don't think there's enough changes where this item would become any decent, in all honesty. So the best thing you can really do is, like, at this point, is just give it a new passive, like think it's something different. Maybe you can work on something a bit more pure stats and less of an active, or an active that works with an ally that would give him a MR, or sort of like how Knight's Vow reduces damage, this would give them resistances. Could be a way to target the item to other situations, but there's never a situation where this item really functions well, unless it's like final item, and even then you don't really want to use it as a final item because it's such little MR that you're shredding, you don't even want to use it against other tanks. Alright, so Winter's Approach. Fimbulwinter is gonna cost 100 more and give less 50 health. I think this is a good change. And I think this is a good change because this item has been broken for a long time and people are starting to pick up on it, so this kind of snips it really quickly and before people start abusing it really hard. It's still a good item. It will still be extremely good on most champions that already did it, and is going to be extremely good for the tanks that are starting to use it. But I do feel like it's a very good nerf and a very good timed nerf in preparation for what's to come. Moonstone Renewal heal and shield power stacks decreased. Okay, so this is a good nerf. I don't like when they nerf Moonstone Renewal, but that's kind of a bias because I really like the item. But I do understand that it was really strong and people just took a shit ton of time to start to see it, and now it's being used in competitive, and everyone's like kind of abusing it. So I understand why they want to bring it a bit down. I think it starts being a lot more into par with the other items, so it won't be just Moonstone Renewal for everyone. But I still, feel a bit bad because I do love the item and it's less picked than I'd expect it to be used. Gale Force cooldown increase is actually a really good nerf. Um, the ability to use Gale Force so often was creating a problem, to be honest. In a lot of situations, Gale Force would just give too much of an escape to some of the AD carries. Something like Lucian was really problematic in the sense that him having a Gale Force was basically uncatchable. Because just the distance he could create was really fucking good. It also functioned perfectly for him as a gap closer for kills because of the extra damage. It worked really well for Jin, for example, where it gained so much safety out of a single item because he wasn't really designed as a champion to have, a dash. So nerfing the safety that the item can provide and the timing of that safety is really good. I really like the change. It won't affect it too much. I think the item will still be picked where it was being picked before, but I think you'll have a lot more counterplay and people can abuse a lot more the time it's not up. And the last change we have here is Time Warp Tonic now restores 50% instantly instead of 30% instead of 50, and gives a bit less movement speed. I think the movement speed is kind of neglectable, but this is not neglectable. It's going to be niche, the times where this will be in effect, but I do know a lot of players and a lot of champions that really use Time Warp Tonic to get a little bit of an edge. With the surprise of the HP growth, they'd get a spell a spell coming back from cooldown because they gained a little bit of HP and could turn the fight. Good point of case would be Aurelia. She used Time Warp Tonic very efficiently, and I think this will hurt a lot of those champions and make those fights a bit more even, because I think a lot of times, I guess it'd be very frustrating. Like if you're fighting someone, out of a sudden they pop a biscuit, they restore 7.5% of their max HP because they were very low, and all of a sudden now they're winning the fight. So I kind of understand why they're reducing it, and I kind of like the change. So people will have to be a lot more aware of the change going forward. Overall, I really like the patch. I especially like Wukong and Nico. I think it's a really good change. I really like Rise and Umberglaive as well. I think it's gonna be a very interesting new patch. I'm kind of sad some of these are very neglectable, sort of like Yasuo and Yone. It's neat buffs, but they won't really do anything. I think the Kalista one is gonna be is gonna be very big, in the sense of like people will for sure look at this and feel like they want to play her. They're gonna play it, and the win rate will slightly go up, but most of the people will feel like she's not different at all. And maybe you'll revamp Kalista into being more prevalent, but as long as you play decently well, she will never be good. And I think this is kind of a fake buff because none of these will really matter. I think Gangplank is really stupid buff. It, I don't know why you're buffing one of the best champions in the game, but I guess you're coming up with a very good skin for him. And the Karthus buff is also really weird. So I'm kind of excited to see what the buff will bring. I'm excited to see what the patch, and we will end up watching changes of the patch. And yeah, we'll see what the next one will unfold. Hopefully everyone will enjoy the video. If you did, please share it, and I'll see you guys